And then I'm going to share my screen just so that it is up once we hit start webinar. I am also going to go off of the video and mute myself. And then I'm going to hit start webinar. And then if we want to give it about 10 seconds, Winston, then we can hop in.
Okay. Easy peasy.
All
Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm hitting start webinar right now, so they'll start to file in.
And everybody's automatic.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. So I see this is okay. Choice. Okay, I guess we'll start shortly.
Yep, it looks like all of our attendees are filing in, so you can take it away.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the AIA Fellowship webinar. Today we'll be starting off using a video that has relevant information related to the logistics of the AIA College of Fellows application and process, followed by a Q&A with AIA California's College of Fellow representatives. We'll be using the AIA Path of Fellowship as a guide for today's conversation. And for some of us who do not know what that is, College of Fellows was founded in 1952. The College of Fellows is composed of members of the Institute who are elevated to fellowship by a jury of their peers. Fellowship is one of the highest honors the AIA can bestow upon a member. Elevation to fellowship not only recognizes the achievement of the architect as an individual, but also elevates before the public and the profession those architects who have made significant contributions to the architecture and to society. Now, on to introductions, starting with myself. So let's just go. So my name is Winston Thorne. I'm currently serving as the first vice president-elect for AIA California, and the director at large and past president for AIA Pasadena Foothill chapter. As a firm owner and general practitioner in Pasadena, I'm actively engaged in the profession and passionately volunteer in support for the betterment of our communities. And with that, I would like to introduce our honored AIA California regional representatives in the order of appearance as presented to the slide, starting off with Mr. Michael Inamoto, FAIA.
Thank you, Winston. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Inamoto. I'm the managing partner of Gruen Associates. We're a firm here in Los Angeles. Probably everybody's heard of our firm here. I received my fellowship in 2007, and my particular object was practice. I think it's still object 2, and I think what's interesting about my submission is the fact that I was the last year where they had paper copies. That was before we all went electronic. And so my experience is relative to the paper submission. And my submission did receive a notice as being one of the best submitted. So I feel like I have some knowledge about how to go about putting together your submission. Okay, and I'm happy to be here and hope I can help you.
Thank you very much, Michael. We have Joyce next, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Winston. My name is Joyce Paul Hamus, and I'm the one of two Northern California regional reps. I work for Smith Group. I'm the office director for Smith Group, San Francisco, Sacramento, and Portland offices. My background and my practice area has been healthcare and senior living. So I was elevated in 2015 and on my under practice and senior living for elevating the senior living industry, both nationally and internationally through trend setting and supportive environments. So my point is that there's a broad spectrum of impacts that you can have on an industry that can really help elevate you. I'm encouraging people of all phases in their careers to seriously consider the fellowship, because it sets a career path for you so that you can start remembering and telling your story early so that you can really realize a holistic impact that you might have on the industry. So it's super important from that standpoint as well. And I'm going to pass it on to Aaron Highland, FAIA.
Thanks, Joyce. Yes, I'm Aaron Highland, and I've been a preservation architect here in San Francisco, going on a little over 30 years now. And I was elevated in 2019, and the notable event of that, it was the last year before the pandemic, and the two subsequent classes didn't actually have a, a nomination party until after the pandemic kind of slowed down a little bit. My object was Object 2, practice, and more specifically leadership, and it was focused on leadership within my firm, leadership within the community and my volunteer work, and leadership in education, and some of the work that we've been doing with our next generation and elevating, building bridges for the academia into the profession. So I'm glad to be here and encourage all of you to jump onto this journey, because it is a journey, and we'll get to some other questions on how to make that journey a little easier for you.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron. And with that, we have fellow Robert Uli from Southern California Regional Rep. He was not able to attend today's session, but I will give you a little insight on his background and his contribution to the profession. So if you don't mind, Robert L. Uli, FAIA is an award-winning public sector architect. So he comes from Object 4. He was elevated into AIA College of Fellows in 2015 for his distinctive accomplishments as county architect of Santa Barbara. He is the only county architect in California to be elevated to AIA Fellow. As a 3-diamond fellow, he is a charter member of the College of Fellows Heritage Society, and he also served on the AIA Santa Barbara since 2015 and elected president in 2019. So he also has served on the AIA California board, and he still does serve on the board with us. So I guess he has a lot of experience in a variety of areas, and we do hope to hear him in person at a future session. And so with that said, once again, thank you for being gracious with your time in discovering together the path to fellowship with AIA College of Fellows. I would like to bring to your attention just a few housekeeping rules. So one, as we watch the recording, we ask for a couple of things. One, please use the Q&A feature for any questions today and keep the chat box to comments only. The final 30 minutes of this webinar will be a live question and answer session with the College of Fellow reps who will gather questions from the Q&A section. And that is not in the chat box. So please send your questions in the Q&A section that is provided in this interface. Two, please also remember to be constructive in any of those questions or comments to the presenters and to one another to ensure we have a session that is productive. Three, AIA California will also submit 1.5 AIA learning units for those in attendance who complete this live session. And finally, as always, the webinar content and the additional resources will be available online shortly after the conclusion of this session. So now let's learn all about fellowship.
There just a few facts. There are about 125,000 architects in the United States. 98,000 are members of the AIA. And the AIA has chapters all over the country. The big states have more chapters, of course. And here in California, we have our California chapter, and then we have 21 components. And this map shows you how it's broken up. You may be familiar with your chapter or not. Some chapters have fellowship committees, some don't. But being a large state, we have 21,000 architects licensed here or eligible to be licensed, and 11,000 are members, but we are the voice of the profession here. And our reps and I and other leaders, we're all represent you and hope to connect you to the resources in your chapter, Northern California or Southern. So about the college, I'm going to pass the floor to Michael, followed by your other regional reps to talk all about the fellowship process, and then we'll come back at the end to talk about myths and answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Rona. So let's talk a little bit about the AIA College of Fellows. The college was founded relatively recently, in my mind, 1952, and it's comprised of members of the AIA Institute who are elevated to the fellowship by a jury of our peers. So it's a relatively new group. Fellowship is one of the highest honors that the AIA can bestow upon any member. Only the AIA National Gold Medal is higher. And here's a photo. I just found out that Aaron is in the upper right corner of this picture. This is one of the investitures we had, I guess now 3 years ago, Aaron. And this is hopefully what all of you are aiming for, all the listeners today are aiming for, to be invested into the College of Fellows. The college has an executive committee comprised of our chancellor, John Costella, our vice chancellor, Roger Schluntz, our secretary, Francis Halsman, and our bursar, Ron Blitch. I think it's important to understand the mission of our college. A lot of people don't know what we're all about. We have basically 3 missions. The number 1 mission is to promote research and scholarly work. And that's embodied in 2 ways. The College of Fellows gives out what's called the La Trobe Prize, a $100,000 biannual research grant. We also have a number of emerging professional component grants, something that is given out annually. Next. The second thing we do, the second mission, is to mentor all the young architects and emerging professionals. And we have a 2-way mentoring program dedicated to lifelong learning and leadership development. And we are part of the Young Architects Forum. And 3, we're here to sustain the college, truly sustain the college through the advancement of other fellows, and by building the College of Fellows Fund. And you'll hear later about the College of Fellows Fund, but today we're really talking about the Fellows Advancement today. So next, Robert.
Thank you, Michael. We all aspire to wear that black robe and get that bronze medal. So we're going to dig a little deeper into the document that becomes your story. And what's important, I believe, is that you've got to find this golden thread. Aaron mentioned it a minute ago. You want to make that golden thread really bright. It starts in your sponsorship letter, goes through your summary statement, marches through your accomplishments, highlights your exhibits, and points to your reference letters. It's kind of like that golden ticket in the chocolate factory. You know, if you get it, then you get in, and if not, you've got to try again. One clear thing is that you've got to prove whatever it is your case is saying. Next slide, please. There was one object added in recent years, number 6. We'll talk about that. Next slide. Design is likely the most popular and challenging of all the objects to try for. Your design work has to rise above the crowd, be nationally, internationally recognized, and award-winning. In 2021, there were 24% of the applicants were awarded elevation in Object 1. Next slide, please. Number 2, next slide. In this object, the jury is looking for clear evidence that you led the design team, were the chief designer, or held a primary role in the projects that make up your exhibits. And Aaron will talk about exhibits in a few minutes. They're not judging you on what you designed or the quality of those designs, but more importantly, that your work is widely recognized through awards and publications. Next slide. This object has the highest percentage of those who are elevated. In the 2021 class, almost 53% of the class was elevated under Object 3. This would include firm partners, principals, associate partners, junior partners. Must demonstrate that your work advanced the firm or the profession through your leadership. Firm given, did you go from 1 office to 4 offices as an example? Did you move the firm from a regional practice to a national practice? And it's important to remember that in this category, the awards are less important than demonstrating how you moved these things forward. Next slide. This is AIA focused, or an allied profession focused. Oops, I think
we should just go back 2 slides, Robert.
Yeah, I think I'm off one. A little too fast there, Amanda. Number 3. Yeah, thanks. So here, this may be harsh, but the jury says, so what, when they're thinking about your nomination. So most of us involved in this organization in some way, local chapter, statewide committee, national board, what impact have you had on the profession or society? What'd you get done? And what impact did you have? Not just locally, you've got to show a ripple effect nationally or broader than that. All right, next slide. This should be 4. Thank you, Amanda. This is one of the most difficult objects to be elevated from. Only 6% of the nominees of 2021 were elevated in Object 4. This is the object that Rona and I were elevated in. Historically, one of the most difficult objects. Public sector architects don't have a private practice, or the resources of private practice were very limited. Most governments don't encourage the pursuit of awards or publications. They want to stay under the radar. So oftentimes, as we're pursuing our career, the golden trail isn't very bright. So it takes us a little bit extra effort. So if you're in that category, Rona and I can certainly help in advising you. Next slide, please. Category number 5, 7% of the class of 2021 were elevated into this category. If your practice story is not strong enough, consider your impact on your volunteer efforts. This might include time that you spent on a planning commission, design review boards, local advocacy efforts. You just have to demonstrate that the impact and ripple effect of your efforts in those endeavors is bright and shiny. Next slide, please. This is the newest object. It tends to make sense because it allows the college to provide some focus on each of these three elements that were kind of buried in a couple of the other objects. So if you're submitting under education as an example, your exhibits, which Aaron will talk about later, can use your students' work as examples as long as you're clear on your impact on that student's work. If you're writing and research is your topic, then you need to demonstrate its impact on the profession. Did something change in the profession as a result of your writing or research? As an example, a friend of mine locally here who was elevated when Aaron was elevated, he used an example of writing for the Architectural Graphic Standards. He did that for a number of years, and that helped his elevation. Next slide, please. So, minimum qualifications. These are all good and very important. It's cumulative years, not consecutive years. So if you were a member and you took a break, you came back, and you're a member, you took a break, as long as you have 10 cumulative years. I can't overstate the meaning of good standing. The staff and the jury will look at good standing, and that includes your sponsor and your reference letters, and to some extent your exhibits. Next slide. Next slide. So Aaron and I will kind of bounce back and forth in a second here. This is just the overview. I want to point out that your submission in total, from your sponsor letter to your reference letter, can't be more than 40 pages. However, you can get 3 extra pages if you use a cover and an index, which don't count for those page counts, but helps the jury navigate your submission. Aaron?
And so I'll talk a little bit about finding your sponsor. Next slide. So it must be an FAIA member or an AIA member who's been in good standing for 10 or more years. They need to write a 1-page support letter. This is very important. Anytime you go beyond the technical limits of the submission requirements, you may be disqualified. So it's very important that the sponsor letter be no more than 1 page. You want to find someone who knows you very well. They know your work, and they can help you through this process. They can be your best advocate and your worst critic, and hopefully make this not only enjoyable, but also challenging for you to actually get through. They can sponsor more than 1 person, but their letters need to be very specific to your nomination package. And they really should need to know your accomplishments. So consider several people, think through your career, or if you're at the beginning of your career and you're thinking about what you need to set up going forward, just keep track of who you think knows and can speak to you and guide you through this process better than anyone else. But speak to several people and then ask them each who they think you should ask to be your sponsor, and then select one. And do consider, or I should say, don't go after a better known person. Don't think that you need to get that best renowned fellow in the college or best designer. Get someone who knows your accomplishments and can guide you in this process. And ideally, if they've done this before, then they can help you through the technical requirements as well. Next slide. One more. So they should be closely involved in your process. And speaking just from my own experience in speaking and talking with others, different sponsors have different amount of time to commit to this. So just be very open and help your sponsor if they don't have enough time to keep you on track. But use that in your consideration on who you select. Their letter should speak directly to your achievements, and per the requirements, they're the buffer between you and your references. So the references have to be in within a certain date, and ideally your sponsor is the one who's going to be dogging your references. But again, keep in touch with your sponsor because they're just as busy as you are and you may need to help. But this letter is kind of the item that sets the stage. This letter and your summary page, which Robert will talk about in a moment, is really the foundation that your juror, and we'll talk a little bit more about the jury process, but your juror, the person who is going to be reading and evaluating and presenting your package, is kind of your proxy. So the sponsor letter and your summary page, these two pages are kind of the place where you shine to make it as easy for them as possible. Robert?
Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you, Jerry. Welcome, everyone.
So,
the summary.
The summary is a one-page document. It basically boils your nomination down, your 39 pages, down to one page. And to make that an even bigger challenge, it's boiled down to the first 35 words of that page. Those would be the toughest 35 words that you've ever written. And you want to remember that golden thread. You're picking it up from the sponsor letter and tying it through your summary and all the way to your accomplishments and exhibits. It may be easier or best to write the summary closer to the end of putting your nomination document together so that you can summarize the story that you're telling. Some do it the opposite way. It contains the most challenging effort in terms of setting up your submission. I found it in my experience that it'd be helpful to tie the exhibits. You know, you say, I did XYZ project, then I would say, see exhibit 3.2 or something. It helps to navigate the jury through this. If the jury has to work for it, then it's going to be challenging. Next slide. Accomplishments are basically your resume, and it's divided into 3 sections: your significant work, honors, awards, and recognition, and publications either by you or about you. It's helpful to use thumbnails in the margins that relate to each one of your entries, and list all of the relevant work. I mean, the list can be quite extensive. But you want to focus on those projects and those accomplishments that highlight your case. As an example, you might have a thumbnail, if it's a landscape format, you'll have a thumbnail in a left margin and then the date of the project, XYZ project to construct an office for a mega corporation in England, see exhibit 3.2 and Joe Smith's reference letter. That way you're tying everything together and making the work of the jury a little easier. For publications and presentations, show the cover of the magazine or the book or the title slide or program cover of a conference where you spoke. For honors and awards, show the image of the award. Show the logo of the entity that gave you recognition or a scan of the certificate if that was the case. Next slide. Now, the format, along with the points that are here on the slide, the format is important. You know, the jury is sitting in a conference room viewing a screen that has a 16:9 orientation. So landscape works best because it fills the entire screen, while portrait will leave a great portion of the screen black. So you want to take as much advantage of that technology as possible. Aaron's going to cover exhibits. Aaron.
Okay, next slide. Here we go. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I think Robert mentioned that there's 40 pages maximum. That's without your reference letters. Your reference letters are actually submitted separately, but you have 40 pages for your entire nomination package. 20 of those pages is in section 3, which is your exhibits. No more than 20 pages and no more than 10 exhibits. So realistically, if you're in design, you may want to show your best 5 projects with 4 pages each. On others, you may do 7 or 8 different exhibits and have multiple pages on some and 1 page on another. They do need to be attested to. So think about this along with your sponsor, the person who's your sponsor. Think about who the right person is to attest to each of your exhibits. You'll need to look at the AI website in the year that you're submitting because the specific technical requirements change slightly each year. For example, one year they allowed someone in your firm to attest to an exhibit, and the following year they said, no, you can't do that. They want a client or a partner firm. So make sure you look at that. And this will be someone who's actually signing your exhibit and making sure that what you say in there is actually correct. Keep your exhibits direct, succinct, and clear. Look at the AIA's website. There's each year they cull out what they consider the best examples of nomination packages. So look at them, look for format. Don't be fancy. This is not your time to be the best graphic designer. This is your time to tell your story. And your story is not your life story. It's a very narrow, specific, edited down version of what your impact in your career has been. So make sure that you think about that in your golden thread. It's not your entire life story. Be very specific. And in these section 3 exhibits, you want to do 3 things in your text. You want to tell them what the challenge was that you overcame, your role in the exhibit or in the project, and then the outcome or the impact that that had. Keep your text to about 100, 150 words and use the rest for pictures. More of the pictures, the better. These exhibits are the tool that your reviewer, remember that the reviewer of the jury is going to be your proxy, and you want to make it as easy as possible for them to present your package to the other jury members. And I just can't emphasize it enough. Edit, edit, edit. Don't tell everything. Architects love to tell the entire story, especially on a project. You do not need to do that. Just mention the points that support your thread. Next slide. And finally, references. So this is very important to be strategic about. You have your sponsor letter, who's an important person who knows your practice and your impact. You have the people who are going to be attesting to each of your exhibits. And then you have 7 people who will provide reference letters. And that's if this is your first time submitting. If it's your second or third time, those original 7 letters stay on the file, and then you're allowed to supplement them each year with 3 additionals. 5 of your letters need to be either fellows or AIA members in good standing. And make sure that your reference letters only touch on 2 or 3 items. Don't have every reference letter speak to every thread in your summary page. And luck would have it, a fire engine's coming by. But and make sure that your references are geographically diverse. If you can, make sure that each piece of your summary page is represented, and if it has a national impact or an international impact, make sure you have other geographical regions represented in one of your reference letters. Next page. So in the summary, again, be clear, concise, get your sponsor, make sure it's a strong sponsor who can guide you. Be specific and make sure your references are specific and they all support your summary statement, and focus on the results of your achievements and the impact and the influence of the profession. Robert?
Thank you, Aaron. So that gives you, I'd like to think of it as drinking out of a fire hose version of your nomination. Now your nomination gets to the jury. And for the class of 2021, there were 239 submissions. They're divvied up among the jury members in an interesting way. Roughly, that means that each juror gets about 34 nominations. And if they spend an hour or so on your nomination, that's 40 hours per juror, or 280 hours of time. There's a great deal of effort that goes into reviewing that document, which is important that it be clear and concise and bright. This doesn't count the amount of time that the AIA staff spends verifying whether or not your sponsor, reference letters, and others are in good standing, and that each exhibit is signed, and that you, in fact, are in good standing. Next slide. So the jury members individually review your nomination. Then they gather in Washington, D.C. for a few days. It will take about 2.5 days or so to get through it all. And the first impact they get is that 35-word statement that you made. That's your hook. If that hook grabbed the jury member assigned to you, your advocate, your person who's going to represent you in that jury, if you grab them with that 35 words and they got through your nomination and they really believe strongly in your case, they're the ones that are going to be making your case in front of the jury. Next slide. So there are 7 members of the jury, only 6 of them vote. By the time the staff have divvied up these nominations, they've got to make sure that you are not in some way connected to one of the jury members. So if you happen to serve on a local or state or national committee with one of these jury members, they will not be your advocate. If they're a member of your firm or interest in that regard, they're not going to be your advocate. As it would be, they're going to spend 10 minutes maybe on your submission. Only 6 of them are going to vote. The advocate does not vote. And then if there are no conflicts and you get the minimum of 4 votes, then you're elevated. If your submission doesn't receive the required number of votes, or is in some other way conflicting, then they'll set it aside until the end of the process and revisit all of those submissions. Next slide. So this can be challenging. Do you have a national exposure? Do you have a national ripple effect? And what are those ripple effects? In the case of Category 4 individuals, in my case in particular, my reach is only within my county because that's my jurisdiction. So, I wouldn't have an opportunity to do a project, say, in New York. So getting that national ripple effect, you might have to explain how it could be if you had the ability to do it. And again, golden thread, you're looking for the golden thread. Make it bright. Leave no room for confusion. Next slide. So Aaron talked about the sponsor letter and the reference letters, and except for a table of contents and the cover, they're looking for not more than 40 pages. All of these elements make up that golden thread we've been talking about. Make sure you hit on each one of them. Next slide. So if you're in design, they're going to want a distinguished body of work. We're all architects, you know, we've all wielded a pencil or a pen, and the jury is looking for exceptional work. They'll find that through publications, through awards, the impact on the practice, lecturing, leading the institute. These are all important. Next slide. I would only modify this slide to say one thing, and that is they're not looking to find out if you got an invitation to speak or you got an invitation to serve on a jury. They're looking to see if you actually spoke or you actually served on a jury. These are important distinctions. Next slide. So if you've led the Institute, they're looking for national offices held, local regional offices, serve on California AIA board as an example, or a committee, jury service in some capacity. You've got a few articles, you've participated in conventions, and you can demonstrate your impact and ripple effect. Rona?
That was just great. Thank you. So myths, I talked about myths. So I'll just go over this generally. You know, one myth is that it has to be all fellows supporting you. That's not true. As my colleagues recounted, it can be, you have to follow the instructions, but it has to be a combination. And if you don't get it the first year, and you could apply in 3-year chunks. The same submission is good for 3 consecutive years, and you have to add reference letters. Those can be even non-architects who have asserted your contributions, clients and others. All the reference letters do not have to be AI members only, as I mentioned. You don't need to drop a lot of big names. You can use, you have to, as Robert described, people that they need to know you. Michael mentioned, and have knowledge of your work. And if you're the client, like Emily, Robert, and I were, you can call on your consulting architects. You can call on the users, members of the public who are your governing officers. If you're in the military or government, these are people who can attest to your broad impact. Object one myth that you can't get elevated without national awards. Object one, you have to have awards, but it doesn't have to be national awards. The jury is not looking to fill quotas, and there's no recipe about it. Second guessing. People have asked me, well, what will they like this or will they like that? Well, it's not what they'll like. You're making your case. So, you know, think about it like some other prosecutor in court, in a way. You're making your case. Lay out your case, and in a focused manner, as Aaron said. Next slide. Any one category, it can vary greatly from year to year. Again, you have to be clear and concise and focused. You have to make sure all the sections are coordinated and tell the story. And they don't want to see your resume. I had that experience. Not your resume, but what you do incrementally as an impact on the profession. As Robert said, the golden thread. As Aaron said, the ripple effect. It should be two or three third-party reviewers. Yes, some chapters do have a developed committee, so we're going to give you some resources, like, for example, San Francisco and Los Angeles. These are big chapters. They have been coaching fellows for a long time. Some of the smaller chapters, people called me, can I take another look? Can I be a mentor? So this is a process. As you reach out to our regional reps, they'll help you find a path to work with, depending on what's available in your chapter and in your area. You can start early. We've been answering questions in the Q&A. Someone asked, well, when do you start? So I like to tell the story when I was elevated, I brought my then young adult daughter and I said, what do you think? And she said, everybody's old. Everybody doesn't have to be old. There are young people, mid-career, early career professionals who have very substantial experience. One year, Joel and I had 2 recent graduates of the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and brand new graduates. And the woman told us, well, we're getting started. So thinking about your career path, of course, you don't always know how it'll go. But if you're thinking about your career path, you can think about this as a goal, the way you would think about working in a certain kind of business or doing a certain kind of work. This is that kind of long-term goal that isn't time dated. But I would say it's much harder for late career professionals who haven't accumulated the incremental impact of contributions to get started. And it's probably going to be a better path for younger people who have thought about it over the years. Finding fellows who are supportive. Yes, there are many fellows who are supportive. I'm hoping we can reach out to emeritus fellows, retired architects who are fellows who can coach the younger generation. AIA California, we are here to create resources from our 21 chapters and nationally. I myself, being part of a national public architects network, I've now sponsored or recommended about 10 different people, one in the Middle East and others all over the United States in different types of positions, the Army, university architects, people who come from state and city government. So if you've worked with somebody, you're a member of the Academy of Architecture for Justice, or you're part of the Architects for Education, and you met somebody in San Antonio and she's been knowledgeable, she can work with you. So it's not limited necessarily to people who are right here. Yes, as I said, you could do 3 tries and then you have to take a break for a year and start over, new references, new submission. But many people don't get it on the first try. I was one of those people, and there are many, many others. So as the chair in San Francisco has told people many times, competing with your peers, people who are very accomplished, and don't be discouraged. It takes time. And many resources. There are samples. There are hundreds of samples. AIA National, every year they publish up the best. One of the best ones was a public architect in Ohio. I was one of his recommenders, and his was one of the best on a I think it was his 2nd or his 3rd try, Lane Booker. So you can look at those successful submissions that stood out, and you can also pull submissions from people that you know and take a look. They're available online. They're not privileged. I think someone put a question in the chat, but we'll get to it. Okay, so we are going to publish a number of links. We have links to contacts in our chapters. We have links to some of the committees, and of course, all the national information that's out there. Before we start losing people on the turn of the hour and get to additional questions, I just wanted to say that I can't see who's on necessarily, but all of us, all of you are the future of the profession. You will be our successors, the next generations, and you will have a ripple effect on all of your work, whether you're a private practitioner, or you're a government architect, or you're in the military, construction manager, or an educator, or you've taken another path. You can achieve recognition by your peers through fellowship. It's a great honor. It's a lot of fun. You meet great people from all over. It's getting more diverse, and we want to cultivate that. We are available to you, your regional reps, volunteering, of course, their generous time, and Sage advice, to direct, to guide, to support. And I want to also thank our staff of AIA California.
Well, so much and so much. Rona, as usual, very passionate about this, and she basically exudes it in her commentary and in her perspective, and a wealth of information and resources. So with that, that was quite a bit of information there. But as we mentioned, fortunately, we have the best people to answer your questions here today. Okay. So I also wanted to mention that a few local chapters, Orange County, Pasadena, and Foothill, and San Francisco, have programs to assist those looking to elevating into the College of Fellows as well. So please feel free to check out the links Rebecca will be posting in the chat if you are interested. And yes, there's a lot of questions, and we've been fielding them as the presentation has been going on, so we will get to that. I just wanted to do a little bit of items here on the schedule of things. One last note, if you want to jot down these are very important dates. As we bring the panelists on screen, we'll get started with a Q&A momentarily. So just real quick, you want to know that submissions will open June 27th. That's next month, folks, 2023. Submissions will close October 5th in 2023, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The notifications to candidates will go out early February in 2024, and final public announcements will be issued late February in 2024, next year. So please note, once again, the presented dates are subject to change. So please check the provided resources once in a while for news and updates. So please, once again, just jot these down for your own information. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Aaron and our esteemed guests. So Aaron, please, if you will.
Thank you. We did want to go through the objects one more time since the original recording got a little discombobulated with the slides. There are now 6 objects. I think they changed that about 3 years ago. There were previously 5. Object 6 is in education. I think that was clear in the video. Previously, I think that was part of object 4, maybe 5. But object 1 is for design. It is the hardest one to achieve elevation in, and you do have to provide a minimum of 5 projects that you were the primary designer for. Object 2, and there was a question in the chat about your portfolio, and what that is that's exhibit 3, which will be your exhibits, and each of the objects have slightly different requirements of what is needed in those exhibits. So object 1, you have to have 5 of your own projects. Object 2, you do have to include 5 architectural projects that are completed, but they could be of your firm that you were involved with. You do not have to be the primary designer for. And I don't know what the projects requirements for the 3, 4, 5, and 6 are, but maybe Robert or Michael, if you know, you can help. Object 3 is leadership within the institution. Object 4 is public service. Object 5 is an alternative career outside of a typical architectural office. And then object 6, we already talked about education. Did anyone want to add to what I had said, Robert or Michael or Joyce? Good. So why don't we go ahead and get through some of the questions. Yeah, this was a good question. Does the College of Fellows Committee assist? And there was a slide up that a few slides ago with the various chapters. I don't know if like the San Francisco chapter has a pretty robust review process, and they ask our members to submit their nomination in three review periods: July, August, and September. I don't know if they're open to people outside the chapter, but you can certainly ask them.
Well, Aaron, I don't think if they want to become a member of the chapter, that's great, right? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what the geographical constraints in California, if you can be a member of any chapter or not. So can we submit to the local chapter for review if we don't have it? This is the same thing, right?
I think just that, I think what is really important for the audience to understand is that there are resources such as yourselves as the committee, and work through your local chapters or components that have fellow members that have, that communicate with other fellow members. So the resources are there, just you'll have to work through your component board or the fellows of that component in order to facilitate your needs if possible.
Yeah, I'll just add that I believe the fellows are really interested in assisting potential candidates. And while I do recommend you start at least at your local component, I think the state, California, AI California, is willing to help direct you to the appropriate person that can help. And I'm virtually positive that finding assistance and answering questions, you'll be able to find that by searching out the help through other fellows.
I would agree with that, Michael, and I think each of us over the years have offered comments to those who've given us their nomination for comment, and I'm certainly happy to do that if you can't find one out of your local chapter or maybe a neighboring chapter.
Yeah, I was going to share my screen, but I don't know who currently is driving this. I wanted to kind of show everyone the fellow page on the website, because a lot of these questions that are coming through now are answered there. Get here. So you go to AIA.org. In order to get to the fellow page, we have it here. It's under programs. And in the programs, you select underneath your honors and awards programs. You go into fellowship, and that takes you to the page that has the fellowship. And there's 4 overview, there we go. So there's 4 tabs: the overview, the details on the 2024 cycle, some resources, and access to past fellows for the directory. This goes through the objects that we've already talked about, and the ripple effect, and the dates, and the fees. So what was it? It was $450. Yeah, so it's $450, and you don't have to pay that until you actually hit submit. There's the current jury. You need to make sure that you don't interact with the jury on your nomination. That'll disqualify you. And what's really important, what's the most important thing here, is the fellowship application. And here's a link for the example of that. And it goes through all of the questions that are asked on your nomination. Eligibility, evaluation, the ripple effect, and then the specific requirements for each of your objects. And then in the exhibit portfolio recommendations, here's the section 1, section 2, and then the exhibits. And so each object has a slightly different requirement. So exhibit 1, minimum of 5 completed projects that you're largely responsible for. Object 2 needs at least minimum 5 completed projects. And so it looks like the rest of these don't require actual projects. Okay. So there's a wealth of information here. It's a little overwhelming.
Aaron, you know, just looking at that application form, it kind of reminds me of, you know, I have a little PTSD right now, putting a portfolio together for a job interview or for getting into graduate school and whatnot. And it seems, is that kind of like the idea? This is really looking at this from the next level up, and it's going to take some time probably to put this together.
Absolutely. It takes a good 9 months. So if you're not started now, you're probably not going to make this year's deadline.
What I've also heard through the grapevine, it probably makes sense as you've presented, all of you, and have experienced that just collect the information over the years that you've produced and just start documenting it as part of your portfolio, because you may go through a process wanting to pursue one objective, but you may be suited for another objective. I don't know. I just would put that out there.
That's right. And I think I haven't looked at the questions for a couple seconds here, but one question was, what object do we submit in? And here they have all of the best of. So each year they take the best submissions and they'll post them here. So this is in the resources section under examples. So you can review these and see if any of them speak to you to help you define your golden thread. If you know who your sponsor will be, or if you have multiple people that you can consider for sponsorship, talk to them. It's really hard for us to tell you what the best object for you to submit in is.
Hopefully, by the time you've kind of put together a rough outline of what you think your nomination is, the object level should kind of appear based on exhibits and your background in section 2. And oftentimes the jury, once they get your nomination, they will suggest where you might be more successful based on what you submitted. And you'll have to change your object if you expect to be successful.
So another question here is, how many hours or days should set aside to prepare? It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. I would say you could easily spend 20 hours a week for several months, if not more. And there's another question about whether you should hire a PR firm or some editor. This is actually a conversation that happens a lot within the college. And unfortunately, you know, unless you're a good writer, hiring an editor or having someone who is a good writer edit your nomination might be very helpful because you really want to be concise. If you can't be concise, it's going to be really hard for your juror to present your nomination.
I would agree with that, Aaron. I would say definitely an editor would be helpful. In past years, the jury has commented that they can tell if you've hired a PR firm because the piece looks like it came from a PR firm. So I think you want to avoid it being too slick and too polished and too, you know, like a firm did it and not the nominee itself.
Here's another question about whether you should be nominated by your local chapter or by other individual architects. The easiest path is to have your chapter support your nomination. It's a one-stop shop, essentially. And most of the chapters really want to support their members in being elevated. So that's not a really high bar to, you know, get their support on. Otherwise, I think you have to have 5? Or is
5.
it 10? 5.
I thought it was 5.
Yeah. If you don't get your chapter to nominate you or support your nomination, then you have to get 5 individual AIA members to sign your submission, which is a little more complicated.
I just want to pop here. There was a question, if licensed in multiple states, do you have to submit under your home state's chapter, or could you submit under another state where you may also have experience and support?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I would say I would start with the chapter you are assigned to. And in your nomination, talk about your work that causes you to be licensed in multiple states. And of course, that helps with the ripple effect, because if you're working in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 states, obviously you've got a national impact of some sort that should make a very interesting story to read.
Here's a couple of good questions. What if I perceive my experience to span across more than one object? Very, very good question. And my answer to that is narrow your golden thread. So in order to be successful, you have to have a really concise story about your impact, not about your career. They don't want to hear about everything that you've done in your entire career. They want to know the most significant impacts that you've had and how geographically diverse those impacts are. So the further
so
abroad,
I say pick one. You got to end up with one. Okay. If you go for multiple ones, I think that's not a good path to take. You got to pick one.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
It says, my contributions have largely been USGBC and ICAA, but not AIA. Is elevation open to me? You don't have to be that active in the AIA in order to reach fellowship. It helps, but if you have a very successful career that has had a lot of impact in your community, throughout the country, internationally, with other industries, that's why there's 6 different objects. So don't think that you have to, be the most active AIA member.
That sounds like that would be object 5, wouldn't it? That would be alternative. Because I think it's object 3. You definitely have to be immersed in AIA business in order to get elevated in that object. But I think 5, you can pretty much do anything.
Yeah, 5 is the alternative career.
Yeah, is it 6 now? I forget which number it was.
6 is education, research, and literature. But say you go submit for practice management in object 2, but all of your advocacy has been with CSI or USGBC. Those are just as important as AIA for your practice.
And so I think just to latch on to that notion, if there might be an individual who believes that they're strong in 2 objectives, is that where maybe that is where you probably need the committee such as yourself that might be able to chime in, Robert or Aaron or Michael or Joyce, in those scenarios, because I can see where it can become challenging, and whoever's reviewing these applications, I understand that year to year it changes. So it could be daunting to determine if you're considering just one objective to submit.
Yeah, that's the most difficult thing, is to figure out which object you're submitting in. And you really do need to know in order to make sure that your nomination speaks to the object. So that would be the first task. So if you're trying to decide between object 1 and object 2, and you have 5 really strong projects, I think you have to go into how object 1 is judged versus object 2. So object 1, they don't review your design. they want to look for how recognized your design has been and how broad that recognition has been. So if you don't have a lot of national awards, a lot of press, a lot of articles written, maybe you don't want to submit an object 1, you would maybe move into object 2.
I think also that's where your local chapter, if they don't have a robust fellows committee, at least your peers, those that are in your community are a good sounding board for you to talk with and say, okay, so what's your perception of my career? And kind of talk it out with them and find out of the 2 objects you're considering, which one kind of bubbles to the top.
And I want to just ask once again, and maybe someone else, Joyce or whatever, if you don't get it the first time, would it make sense to reapply the following year with the same package, given the same effort? Or maybe it's depending on like what happens when they review. Do they give you a scorecard or a crit where you're deficient so that you understand where to gauge if you were to reapply the following year?
They do, the jury does provide comment, and the staff also provide comment because your nomination, once submitted, is reviewed by staff before it gets to the jury. They're checking to see if all of your references are in good standing. They're checking to see if you're in good standing, which includes, did you get all your CE units by December 31st of the year you filed? They check all of that before it even gets to the jury. And then once it gets to the jury takes notes, and your feedback, if you were not elevated, your feedback then is given to you a month or so after the whole thing is done. And so if you expect to get elevated on your second round, you take that feedback seriously and modify your document accordingly. Because the jury members, I believe, serve 3 years, it is likely that you would get the same juror in the 3 years that you are being evaluated. The East Coast basically looks at the West Coast, and the North looks at the South, and the South looks at the North. So you're likely, if you're in California, you're getting a juror who's on the East Coast or in the North or the South. They might move them around a little bit in that regard. But it is likely that the same jury, whatever the mix and whoever evaluates it, the same jury will see you at least 2 years because they serve 3 years. And if you didn't take their comment from your first round, they're likely not to be very happy with you on the second round. It took me 3 rounds to get through the whole thing, so I'm a slow learner. It took me a little while to get it done.
I do know some. Go ahead, Joyce. Go ahead.
I would just say everything is light. You just have to keep asking, so what? So what? So for every exhibit you had, for everything you put into it, obviously you should just challenge with a colleague or somebody like, so what? Why this? So you should definitely revise it. You don't have to change it, but you need to revise the so what to answer that question with everything that's in it.
I did have someone that submitted, they were not successful 3 times, and they had submitted in one object the first time. They tried that object the second time, and the comment that they got from the second jury or the second nomination was maybe they should try a different object. So they tried the different object, and then the comment they got then was they didn't adjust the story significantly enough to apply to that particular object. So it's not an easy, this is probably the most difficult thing, is figuring out which object and what your story is. I wanted to kind of frame what people are involved in your submission. So you have your sponsor, who should be AIA. Your first year, you're going to have 7 references, so you're going to have 5 AIA members. So in that process, you're going to have 6 people that are going to be helping you or speaking to your nomination. Ideally, if they're fellows, that makes your nomination stronger. So those 5, 6 people can give you a lot of advice on what your object should be. You know, maybe they'll be even willing to review your nomination and help you refine it and narrow it. Certainly your sponsor should be able to do that as well. And then you have each of your exhibits need to be signed by someone attesting to it. So you can think about that person, you know, quite often it's your client. They don't want someone in the same firm signing your exhibits. So your clients or someone who's very important to the project is another source of source of ideas, I guess you would say. What other questions do we have? Oh, here's a good one. Just lost it. I was told I cannot coordinate with the sponsor or references or tell them what to write. How do I get around that? Your sponsor is the one who's supposed to be coordinating with your references, and you are not supposed to see the reference letters before they're submitted.
I would add that and echo that you're not supposed to read the letter that they wrote, but obviously you're going to contact potential people to be references so that your sponsor knows who they are. And I think it's at that point you can give them some points or suggestions that you would like to see in a letter that they write. I had reference letters focus on a particular exhibit. So I gave them the exhibit as a supporting element and then suggested that they reference that exhibit in their letter so that you can connect the front of the document to the back of the document. So you can certainly suggest what you want them to say. You just can't read what they said.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you don't want all your sponsor or all your reference letters speaking to your entire nomination. So be strategic about which reference letter speaks to which point and give that person 2 or 3 talking points.
One thing I would ask, just following up on Robert's comment, you know, in this day and age where we have, you know, you say something and it shows up somewhere in some social media feed, is that something that we probably want to take into consideration? Are there sources out there? Are there references out there? Are people posting? Or you should probably just keep everything confidential? Just a question I'm asking.
I don't know to what degree the jury uses, is allowed to use, or have tools outside of the college's review process. It is interesting, you know, with chat AI and the rest of the things, you know, are your references becoming digital references and they're not actually real people? So I'm sure that at some point the college is going to have to worry about that. I doubt that it's on their radar now.
So get it in now, sooner than later. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
So there's a question about how the actual letters or the reference letters are submitted. So you will, in your application, input who your reference letters are with their email addresses. And then AIA Honors will send that reference person a link informing them that they've been asked to submit a letter, and then they'll have a link to upload their letter to your file in AIA. And then here's one: if I applied 2 times and skipped the last year, can I submit this year as part of the 3-year max?
No.
I do not believe so.
No.
You have to do it 3 consecutive years or start over. And if you don't make it in your 3rd year, you have to sit out for 1 year and start over.
And another point to Aaron's listing of reference letters, the jury uses the individuals you've listed in your nomination as the letters they're going to get out of your digital file that has been submitted. So while you might have multiple letters submitted and you change your mind at the last minute, you got, Barney Rubble to write you a letter, but you'd rather have Fred Flintstone. And so you get Fred to write a letter, and now Barney and Fred have a letter in there. And you might have, more than the required number of letters. The jury is only going to use the list of letters that you've included in your nomination, not all of the letters that are in the folder for your nomination.
So Anne, good to see you on here. She writes a question: what object does equity policy for architects involved in public contracting fit in? Again, it's a really tough one. I know you, Anne, so you could, boy, I don't think you can submit an object 4, but you could certainly do object 5 or object 2. You built your practice around public work. So I hope that helps.
So, Aaron and so architects who do public work but are not public work architects. It's kind of a funny play on words there, isn't it? If you work for a public agency, you would be in 4, but if you're a consultant architect to a public agency, then it would be design or something else, wouldn't it?
Right. Yeah. Right. Object 2 or object 5.
Yeah.
So how are we on questions here? We're coming to the end of our session. I just want to make sure if we didn't capture everything, there'll be opportunities.
Yeah, I was looking, there was one good question here about not private, but a project that I assume is under non-disclosure, right? So I think that any object or any exhibits that you submit as a project, they need to be public record, because these will become public. Anyone can get these by requesting your nomination from the AIA.
You'd have to be released from the NDA that covers the project before you could submit it.
Yeah.
So can if we're done with or mostly done with the questions, we were talking about this process and it seems so arduous and so complex and time consuming, but timing is everything. So when is the right time in your career? But I think one of the messages that we want to say is we really want to help people get it. And we want more people to think about it and to submit. And so although it sounds like this is just a huge intimidating process, take it bite by bite size. I'm sure everybody that's here is thinking about it in some way. San Francisco only had two fellows elevated this last year, California 10. And personally, I would love to see a more diverse group get through. I think that's one of the challenges facing our profession. And so I think we are all here to help with anybody and encourage people to submit, give it a try. Even if you're, just go through it once so that you get what is happening, even if you don't submit, but just start thinking about it, because not only does it help you for the submission, but it helps you for your career in terms of planning your path out. And my best advice is keep a record of your documents, of your projects, of your accomplishments. Whenever you spoke at something, any awards you've got, keep it in a list in a file drawer or somewhere. People don't use file drawers anymore, but it's really going to be helpful when you have to pull that stuff up. Because for me, when I started, things weren't digital. So we had to go find it out of dead storage drawings and then scan them to use. So you don't know what the media will be through your career. So keep copies in different ways so that you are ready. Keep it of everything, because you don't know where that golden thread comes. So I think just be thinking about it. So,
thank you very much, Joyce. Is there any other closing remarks, Aaron or Robert or Michael? Any last thoughts?
Good
Well,
luck.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Robert.
Sorry, Michael. Just good luck in the process. It's a lot of work. We're here to encourage you. If you need words of encouragement, please feel free to reach out to any of us. It is the highest honor the profession can give you is to become a fellow, and just wish you the best of luck in doing that.
I want to echo that because that's absolutely true. I also want to just emphasize that it's amazing to me how many of my fellows are willing to help everybody attain this elevation. And I know the LA chapter is very big on trying to reach out and help. But I also know my colleagues here on this webinar are also very, very interested in helping you. And so there's a tremendous amount of resources out there, and you should take advantage of that. And we could really teach you something about how to go about this process. It is apparently a daunting process, but it is achievable, and you can do it. And yeah, look in the drawers, and you'll find your backup, and you should really try to really focus on what object it is, and to make sure that you understand what that ripple effect is.
Yeah, I was going to add on to what Joyce was saying for the kind of the sequence of how to submit or how to prepare your submission. I would start with your summary statement. Try to figure out what your 35-word statement is, then do your summary page, section 1.0, write that up, and then get some feedback. And then once you have that kind of framed, then start thinking about your exhibits, get that together, get some feedback, and then do one dry run of the entire thing, because your section 2 is basically your portfolio and your resume. Then try to get feedback on the entire thing together, but don't try to write the entire thing at once. It's just too daunting.
Well, once again, thank you very much, each and every one of you. Michael, thank you. I want to echo your statement regarding resources and Robert's statement as well. The fellows are here to support your endeavors, and reach out to your local component, and we are here for you. That is really the gist. And if you don't have that support, you can go up to the AIA California, and we will point you in the right direction if need be. So with that, I want to thank everyone again for joining us today, and give special thanks to our esteemed panelists for helping us navigate the path of fellowship. And as attendees, if you have made it this far, AIA California staff will submit your AIA CE credits. So it should appear in your transcript in a few weeks. More details about our upcoming webinars and how to register will be made available to you soon in a follow-up email. And as well, and always, additional resources and tools can be found on AIA California website. So please continue to advocate, communicate, support, and listen as one voice in fellowship for members of the architecture profession. Thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.